Hi, this is Christian from Forest of Art and Healing Arts. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how our posture and movement patterns are developed from the sensory experience of our body in its environment. Then I will talk about how we can change our posture and movement patterns and how this might change our environment. In a previous video, I talked about how fascia takes the shape of the posture we hold over time. Fascia records everything that happens to us, including how we hold our body in response to what is happening. In this video, I will shift my focus from connective tissue to muscle and nerve tissue, for it is with these tissues that we carry out our movements and hold our postures. Muscles contract when nerves tell them to. The type of muscle that moves our limbs and holds our posture is called skeletal muscle. And this type of muscle only contracts when told to do so by nerves, either in a reflex chain or nerves in a chain whose command originates in the brain. When muscles are told to do so by nerves, they contract their fibers, thereby shortening their length and moving a lever in the body, such as bending your arm, or providing a stabilizing pull on one side of a bony structure so that the movement of the levers can be done on the other side. For example, your gluteus medius muscle contracts on the right side of your pelvis to stabilize it when you are flexing your hip on your left side. The primary movement of levers is actually only a tiny part of the overall network of coordinated muscle action that is needed to move the lever. Moving your arm or leg requires the brain to coordinate and innervate muscles all over the body to achieve a smooth and balanced primary movement. Since we are usually moving or holding positions throughout the day, the brain has to continuously coordinate sets of muscular contractions, pulling here and there, stabilizing here and there. Almost all of these coordinated contractions occur unconsciously. Learned coordinated movement, including the contraction and release of primary movers and supporting muscles, is carried out through putting into motion patterns stored in the brain called sensory engrams. To understand how sensory engrams function and to capture the potential of how we can change the results of this function from maladaptive to healthy posture and movement, we need to reverse what seems like a logical notion about the relationship between the brain and the body. The brain tells the body what to do, right? Yes. But from where did the brain learn what to tell the body? From the body. When we decide to move a muscle, our thought innervates nerves in the motor cortex of the brain to send out necessary commands to the primary movers and supporting muscles. The brain calls up an engram, a pattern for the desired movement. Stand up like this, walk like this, pick up your coffee mug like this. Or more intricate patterns, such as play box partita on violin like this, or dribble the football down the pitch like this. However, the motor cortex is not the source of these patterns. It is better understood as a transfer location in the message chain. The source is the sensory cortex and association centers. It is here where sensory engrams are constructed and stored. Let's see how these patterns are written into the sensory cortex. Sensory means feeling. This part of our brain receives information from the body. It feels the body and its environment. Something stimulates a nerve in the periphery. This becomes information which travels to the spine, synapses onto spinal nerves, and then travels up to the brain. The brain receives many different types of information, including the following. Numerous receptors in the skin send information about temperature, touch, and different types of pressure. Receptors in the muscles, called muscle spindles, send information about the speed and length of muscle contractions. Receptors in the tendons, called Golgi tendon organs, send information about the tension developed by each muscular contraction. Together, the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs give us information about the mass of objects as we move about in our environment, and about how much we contract our muscles to move through our environment. There are receptors in our joints that tell our brain the exact position of our joints in space. By combining this information with the information from our muscles, The sensory cortex records the position and effort of our body in every space it inhabits throughout its life. There are also reflexes that move us. Some we are born with, such as the rooting reflex, which allows us to breastfeed, and some we develop, such as a threshold level of a Golgi tendon organ. Together, all of this information that I have been describing is called kinesthesis. It is one of the 5 senses. The brain also receives sensory information from the other 4 senses: touch, sight, hearing, and taste. All of this information is received and processed in the brain to gain a reading on the environment and to record our position and actions in this space. For example, a package of sensory information includes all of these separate bits. When you hear the coach yell at you to dribble the football down the pitch, you tighten and loosen certain muscles to a certain degree for certain periods of time and repetition. You hold certain joints at specific angles. If this is a skill that you already know how to do, then you do all of this unconsciously. You might be doing it in the presence of certain members of your team, 3 of whom are your mates and 2 of whom you hate, who are playing the opposition during this practice. Yes, even psychological information, such as how you feel moving amongst these people in this space, is gathered by the brain to process and develop a sensory engram for the skill and to tell the motor cortex how to respond. Your physical event, which is dribbling the football down the pitch, will result from the sensory engram for that skill under these specific circumstances. In different people, under different circumstances, this information may result in different engrammatic actions, including dribbling very well in the presence of this coach and these opponents. Or conversely, one's brain might literally cause a lack of coordination in one's legs, so that they make many mistakes in dribbling and pass the ball right into the possession of the opponents. Upon making the mistake, one turns to the coach and sees him shake his head at one's deplorable dribbling skills, which then causes one to feel bad and droop one's body into a slump and then nearly trip on the pitch. All of this information is bound into a sensory engram. The first result, dribbling well, is a sensory engram of a subject who wins under these circumstances. The second is the engram of failure. Both have been learned, built up in the body through practice in specific environments, and both can be unlearned and changed. Now consider the same process for an employee in an office. The movement engrams here include posture, sitting position, walking through the office, physical presence amongst colleagues and superiors. How one performs each of these physical events, many of which are covered by the field of ergonomics, is a result of sensory engrams learned within the specific physical and social environment of specific workplaces, in combination with the sensory history of how the subject grew up. In the same manner that one learns to move on the football pitch, one learns to move through the office under specific spatial, psychological, and social circumstances. This same process is true for how all of our movements are developed, including participation in hobbies, lovemaking, leisure activities, and our presence in our families. Learning new activities is handled by what is called the alpha system, which includes the brain, the spinal nerves, and the muscles. This system is conscious as it learns new skills and gives voluntary commands to the muscles. There's no sensory engram yet. It can only be an experiment with movement. A positive result, the coach nods his head yes, can be registered by the brain as a reason to continue the specific movements and make them into an engram. A negative result should, under logical circumstances, tell the moving subject to continue experimenting with coordinating muscles for this new skill until he gets it right. Once we learn an activity, it can become an engram. These engrams are carried out by what is called the gamma system of the brain, spinal cord, and muscles. These become unconscious habits, including posture, balance, and support. The gamma system is conservative. It favors stability over change. The sensory engrams of the gamma system allow us to do many things at once without needing to consciously think about how we are holding our body. For example, I can deliver a lecture at a university without having to stop and think about how my vertebral column is set in space. My mind is free to talk about the topic without stopping to hold my lower back as I turn pages on the lectern. And this is good. However, what if one's posture and movements are counterproductive? What if how a professor holds his body includes a great deal of tension in the back muscles, which contract the lower back into an excess curve, or if his neck is prominently jutting forward because his lecture engram includes contracting the sternocleidomastoid muscles? And why might he do that? For many reasons. As he learned to deliver lectures, first an activity of the alpha system, he may have learned within the brutal conditions of judgment and competition of the academic world. He appears calm on top, but holds his lower back very tight, binding his anxiety with these muscles, and juts his head forward in determination. This becomes his unconscious gamma-controlled pattern of movement and posture. Over time, he will compress his intervertebral discs and end up with a prolapse. This is not a genetic condition, as many allopaths think. This is a learned posture. This results from a counterproductive sensory engram. Engrams can also be traumatic in origin. Traumatic attacks to the body, such as sexual abuse, bullying, or even participation in a war, can cause responses such as flinching, jerky, uncoordinated movement, or somatic dissociation. It can also cause rigidity, as the physical body attempts to armor itself against further attack. Traumatic engrams cause counterproductive movement, which can lead to the degradation of the affected parts of the body. By now you have noticed that a large part of the stimulus the brain receives has its origin in the environment, both the physical environment and the social environment. The natural and built environment also play a role in movement development. Sensory engrams and the movement and postures they generate are built up from the body's attempts to navigate physical environments. Bodies move differently in cities than they do in nature. Specific architecture places a material limit against which the body collides and moves around. A body that learned to move in a large middle-class suburban home will develop vastly different sensory engrams than a body that learned to move in the cramped flats of a poor section of a city. The action of the muscles of legs and feet that experience walking on uneven surfaces will have different sensory engrams than feet and legs that always walk on flat surfaces. And then there is a social environment. Sensory engrams are built up in the context of specific cultures, societies, neighborhoods, and families. The brain records the responses of people in your world to how you move in this shared world. This includes responses to perceived movements of obedience, sexuality, threat, sport and aesthetic skill, and so forth. Social responses to your movement will partly determine how you move in these spaces. This social aspect of movement must be taken into consideration if we are to try to change our sensory engrams. I will take up one of these examples. The somatic theorist Don Hanlon Johnson writes about how some people are taught to shrink before authority. When a subject with this type of engram is in front of a person of authority, a person who wields power in a hierarchy, the subject's brain initiates an engram that causes his muscles to tighten in such a manner that he literally shrinks, he bends, he lowers his head, he retracts his neck, he tightens his pelvis, and he does this unconsciously. This is especially true if his or her very presence in certain social circumstances is opposed. For example, when a person who is recognized through their skin color as being black walks through a town in which some people are white supremacists, especially if some of them are members of the police force. It is impossible for this social condition not to be included in the sensory information that constructs the person's sensory engrams, the person's very movements and posture. The same is true for women in rapacious or misogynist social conditions, or people of any sexual orientation or gender identity who are attacked in any way by homophobes and other like bigots. All social input into a body becomes part of the sensory engram and results in the specific movement patterns of individuals. Movement in space constructs our self, our character in motion. When it becomes controlled by the gamma system, it drops into the unconscious and rigidifies into our stereotypical movement. If this movement is counterproductive, it will contribute to physical problems over time. If certain areas of the body are thereby hardened, if they don't move much, the lymph flow through them decreases. The immune system ceases to work well. Over time, the area becomes malnourished of oxygen and nutrients, and wastes get stopped up and stagnate in it. Lymph fluid can even crystallize in chronically compressed areas. Compression causes unnatural growth in the connective tissue, which can be the source of tumor formation. Toxicity and malnourishment causes misinformation in the tissue. Misinformation causes mutation. And this combined process can result in cancer. Wilhelm Reich calls cancer cells poorly breathing cells. Similarly, if an organ, for example the lungs, is infected by a virus or other pathogen, and it is compressed, held rigid, unmoving due to counterproductive or traumatic sensory engrams, then the immune system does not work well in there to fight the pathogens. The body is at risk of succumbing to the illness. Now, I know that my explanation of sensory engrams and the control of movement has taken a bleak turn. But if we go all the way back to the beginning of the story, to my explanation of how sensory engrams begin, we will find a startling piece of good news. The body is made through how we use it. Its structure is determined by its function. If you want to change your body, change how you use it. Change how you move it. Move differently, and you will literally rewrite your sensory engrams. With counterproductive and traumatic engrams, it's as if your body was programmed by other people in your life and environment. You move about in the manner that they want you to move about. This is somatic alienation. When you begin to move differently, you will begin to de-alienate yourself. You will begin to offer your brain different kinesthetic sensations from your muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs, and joint receptors. A different kinesthetic input will code a different movement output. You will reprogram yourself on your own terms. The field of somatics, body work and movement work, has developed many different techniques and practices to help you change your sensory engrams and to become aware of yourself through movement and change. These include, but are not limited to, body work, structural body work, craniosacral Traeger work, and Reichian therapy. Movement work, Feldenkrais, Alexandra technique, expressive movement, and Mentastics. Body work, especially techniques that work with the fascia, such as structural body work, will sculpt a new body for you. After the session, your brain will receive different kinesthetic information, different feelings from tissue that has been structurally changed, and use these different feelings to build new and more adaptive sensory engrams. To make best use of bodywork for this purpose, make sure to stay as aware as possible of your body in space and society after you receive a bodywork session. For example, say that you get a structural bodywork session from us here in Berlin. Notice how you feel walking back to the S-Bahn station. Notice how you move among others, how they respond to your movements. Notice how your newly changed body is received by your family or your partner at home or your colleagues at work. The differences may be subtle, but paying attention to them allows you to take control of programming your body in space and society. Movement work. This type of somatic work is specifically designed to make a change in how you move and hold yourself, and then make you aware of that change. Through making your unconscious engrams conscious, and through practicing different movements, and thereby producing a different kinesthesis, these movement practices will help you develop self-awareness and express a different self-image. I will show you a couple of exercises to do at the end of this video, but before I do that, I want to mention that body work and movement work will also help you challenge and change the environment that was so damaging to you in the first place. Every subject's moving style, including shrinking before authorities, plays a role in maintaining that society which created it. When that subject moves differently, she does not play her role anymore and introduces a wobble into the system. The system feels the change and is now given the opportunity to become aware of itself. Expected movement patterns which were unconscious become conscious. The authoritarian leadership of the society will now be forced to reveal its program. It will be forced to state that it wants you to bend low and maintain a humble posture. This offers an opportunity for social somatic change. Obviously, the authoritarians can also demand obedience, but at least now you know what's up, and you have the awareness to fight the power. I'm going to give you 2 examples from mindful movement work. These examples have been sourced from Mentastics and Gestalt Therapy. These are only examples to explore the points I've been making. This is not a training in these methods. If any of these interest you, I encourage you to pursue the training in these specific methods. Also, you can check out our classes in mindful movement work. So let's start with the Mentastics. Mentastics is a compound word which comes from mental gymnastics. The idea is that we're going to do an exercise that makes a change, a physical change in one part of the body. And then we're going to feel the difference between the side we worked and the side we didn't work. And then we're going to transfer that feeling in our mind from the side we worked to the side we didn't work. So the key to this exercise is to be able to use the brain consciously to let go of or relax or somehow change movement on the side that you haven't done anything physically to it. So let's start. If you stand with 1 foot in front, 1 foot in back, lean forward just a little bit, let your hand hang in front of you, and then just very lightly flick your hand. So. You're moving your wrist in a circle, causing your hand to flick. And the idea here is to do it as lightly as possible. And you ask yourself the question, how can I do this more lightly? How can I be more relaxed? This is a meditation that you ask yourself, how can I do this more lightly? And there's always a way to do it more lightly, which entails letting go of the tension that we have in our hands. So you're going to do this for a little while, maybe 4 minutes. And then you move to the next part of this, which is where you bring your hand up and then let it drop. You bring your hand up and without any control, let it drop. Bring it up and let it drop. So you're not throwing it down and you're not catching it or slowing it down. You're just letting it drop. And you do this 20 times, 25 times. The count is not important as the result. Then you're going to do your whole arm. So you're going to raise your entire arm up like this, and then let it drop without control. Now it's hard to do because most of us control our arms. So bring your arm up. Let it drop without control. And I do a little kind of a butterfly with my hand up like that. Let it drop without control. So again, you're not throwing it, and you're not catching it. Just letting it drop. not holding on to it at all. And you may do that 20, 25 times. Then you can shake your hand and swing your arm, like so. And you're using your body, a little bend in the knees to propel. So again, you're just letting go of your hand, not holding on to it, letting it go forward, letting it go backwards, just letting it swing, trying not to hold on to it, asking yourself, how can I do this more lightly? How can I be more relaxed at this? And you do this for a while, again, 3 minutes, 4 minutes or so. Then when you're done with that, you stand and you notice what you feel in the arm you just worked. Let all the sensory information come into your brain and be conscious of it. And compare it to the other side. Notice how your fingers of the 2 hands feel, and your wrists, your lower arms. Notice the difference in your elbows, your upper arm, your shoulders. Notice if your shoulder up here and your neck feel different. For me, I feel like this is lengthened while this is still compressed in here. Then you close your eyes, go inward, and using only your brain, not moving anything, using only your brain, you're going to transfer the feeling from the side you worked over to the side that you haven't worked yet. Now, doing this at home, you would take, again, 4 or 5 minutes to stand there and transfer the feeling from one side to the other. And the key here is to be able to let go of this hand, this arm, this shoulder, using only the head. Then when you're done with that, you can then switch to the other side and do the exercise on the other side, flicking the hand, dropping the arm, dropping the entire arm, and then swinging like that. And you can stand and feel again. Practicing this over time, then you can take these feelings out into the field. As you're walking about your world, your place of work, your family, your friends, the city you live in. And you can notice, when are you contracting? And under what circumstances are you contracting? And can you use your mind to let go and to not contract under those circumstances? If you can't, why not? Begin to identify what in your world causes you to tighten, causes you to build maladaptive sensory engrams. You can change those sensory engrams using Mentastics, especially using the mental part. Now we're going to use Gestalt Therapy combined with movement work. So we're going to go now into a psychological exercise. We can only go a little ways into this because the experience will be individual, and I can just set it up for you and then you take it on your own. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to think about a part of our posture or our movement that we want to change. We'll just work with posture right now. Let's take what I've been talking about in the video, this engram that shrinks before authority. So let's say that, and I'm not saying this is necessarily you, anybody watching this, this is just an example. Let's say that your chest is sunken in, your head comes down, maybe a little to the side, eyes lowered, hands comes in, and this is your position of being shrunk before authority. And then as you walk about, you take very little space in the world and you sort of flinch, especially when you come across people who you sense are more powerful than you or wield more power than you do. And let's say you want to change that. Okay, so first you establish that posture. Just notice how you are. So from the side, your chest might be sunken in, shoulders forward, head down and forward, something like this, okay? Now think about the opposite of that. So the opposite of that would be to lift the chest forward and up, to roll the arms back, to lift the head up, and to look right at the person with your eyes. So, from the side, if you're sunken down like this, the opposite is to move your chest forward. So you go from here, you move your rib cage up and forward, roll your shoulders back, lift your head up, and you look straight at the person. If there's a twist, so from the back, say that with that you have a kind of a twist, then the opposite would be to straighten that twist and stand up straight. Now what you do is you take the first posture, shrunk before authority, and you move from there into the second posture, standing up straight, and then back into the first posture. And you move back and forth between the first posture and the second posture. And you notice what it takes in your body to move from one posture into another posture, like so. Then we're going to establish these two postures as two characters, split them off from each other, and have them face each other. So, let's start with the second posture, which is standing up straight, chest out, arms back, head straight, back straight, looking at the person. Notice what this character is like. Notice also what you feel when you stand in this character. This will be easier to feel because it's different. It's not the way you normally stand. Now come down into the first posture, the way you normally stand. So you're sunken in, your arms are forward, your head is down, your eyes are down. Notice what this character is like. Notice what you feel when you're in this character. Now come up into the second character. Notice what you feel. Maybe there's a sense of fear here. And maybe that fear, underneath it, has a sense of power. In fact, maybe that's why you feel fear, because you feel powerful in your body. But then in this environment, you think, oh, no, I don't want, I really want to go back to this. My tendency is to want to go back to that. Notice that, but hold that first posture. Then go into that posture that you normally have. Hold that second posture. Then go into the posture that you normally have, the first posture, and feel this. Maybe this feels more secure, but actually underneath this, you have an anxiety about the way that you are in the world. So here you're anxious and secure because you fit this environment. Your role in this environment fits. Here, you're powerful, but you're afraid of being powerful. Now, split the two characters off from each other. Come over into your first posture. Look at the powerful one and speak to it. What do you say? Whatever comes to your mind, without censoring. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind without censoring. Speak to that character that's standing up straight. Then come over here, take the more powerful straight posture, and speak to this character here the way you normally are. What do you say? Whatever comes to your mind without censoring. Just say whatever comes to your mind. Now, you have a dialogue between these two characters. And go ahead and speak back and forth, literally taking one position, and then coming over here and taking another position, going back to this position. And the way that you follow this in, I can't follow it in on this video because it's individual to you. But the way that you follow this in is through a chain of associations. That is to say, if this character is saying one thing, to what does this associate to? Does it remind you of a childhood experience? Does it remind you of an experience in a particular time of your life? And then this one, to what does this associate to? Does it remind you of maybe a person in your life? These can associate to people or time periods, and again, that's individual for you. But all we want to do with this exercise is create the two characters, the way you are and the change, put them in contradiction to each other, have them dialogue to each other, and that's the basis now for sensory engram and movement change.